Hello and welcome to the Wild Mom Show. My name is Ingrid M. Williams. I'm your host for today. Thank you for joining us. We are here with Miss Kumari Ghafoor-Davis of Optimistic Expectations, and she is going to tell us how she helps parents become effective through her parenting coaching. And I know we all say there's no manual for this, and I think that Kumari is the closest thing that we can get to an actual manual. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. We really appreciate you being here because sometimes I'm ready to pull my hair out. And I know that there's other moms that are out ready to pull theirs out too. See, I cut it low because it was just patchy at some points. So tell us a little bit about Optimistic Expectations and why you got started.
Well, my company, Optimistic Expectations, is a parenting consulting company. So I work with parents in school districts as well as individually and in groups, and I work with them to have better relationships with their children.
So have you always worked with children, around children in the school district? What did you do before you started Optimistic Expectations?
I worked in social services since 1993. I worked mainly with children and families who were in crisis.
Okay.
So most of my work ended up being in foster care.
Okay.
So I was an administrator for a number of years, and in 2008, with the recession, the down of the economy, boom, 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 ended up being downsized several times, and I decided to start my own company.
Nice. So I know I feel like sometimes I need a manual, but there are some parents out there that feel like, you know, they've been parenting for several years and they don't need a manual. Tell us some reasons why a parent would want to consult with you and just kind of get a little insight.
Well, most of the clients that I have are parents who have been referred either by the school districts that I work with or parents that I've met at different events that I attend. So when I work with parents, I work with them to have better relationships. I work with them about being emotionally sound for their children, listening to their children, do a lot of talking about listening, because as parents, sometimes we like to talk, just like to talk. So because of that, because sometimes we just want to cram it all in, sometimes we have to learn that we just have to listen. So that's one of the main things that I talk with my parents about, talk with them about listening skills, making sure that we're, of course, getting those 17 summers and all that information in we need to get in those 17 summers, but also ensuring that we're giving them sound information and letting them know that we're there for them.
Oh, that's good. Tell us a little bit about your mission statement that you have for Optimistic Expectations.
Well, what I mainly focus on is assisting parents to have better sound relationships, more effective communication, more disciplined strategies, and basically being able to motivate their children for better results.
So when you talk about relationships, because there's a lot of relationships that come into play when it comes to parenting, which ones do you mainly focus on? Is it, you know, obviously parent-child, but do you give some assistance with like co-parenting relationships? Because that's, you know, that's just the reality of the world. A lot of parents co-parent. So do you help with that too?
And that's a great question. Actually, a lot of the parents that I work with are either single parents that have children where they don't know what's happened, they don't know why they're not talking to them anymore. I work a lot with co-parents, parents who have been divorced or separated, and they're trying to ensure that they're on the same page. And then I work a lot with parents who are married and they're trying to work with their children because something has happened where there's been a disconnect.
Oh, that's good.
Yes.
That's really great information. So what programs do you offer? Are there different levels? Children come in a variety of different age regions. So give us a little background of the different programs that you offer for the different stages.
Right. So for children who are younger, I talk a lot about social emotional development.
Okay.
I work with parents to talk with their children, listen to their children that are very young, because the reality is I've worked with 3-year-olds that can tell you why mom and dad are getting divorced, right?
Wow, yeah.
You know, and they'll tell you why. They're extremely focused and they understand what happened, which is not always good.
Yeah.
But and then I also work with parents who have children between the age of 7 and 9, those age where the kids are kind of like transitioning, don't know if they want to be a baby anymore, don't know if they want to be a big boy now, a big girl now. And then I also work with parents who are teens and preteens.
Okay, let's talk about the transition, because I feel like, you know, as a parent, I'm there. My daughter's 7, and it's kind of totally different from when she was, you know, pre-K. You know, now we're in 2nd grade, and I'm noticing just talking to the moms out and about around school at birthday parties, it's a really big transitional ages. So let's talk about that one and what are other transitional ages that the children will experience as time goes on.
Exactly. Well, there actually are a lot of transitional ages, right?
I know.
So
Every day is a transition.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So you have that transition between pre-K and kindergarten because of the workload. Then you have that transition between that first, second, third grade. Depending on the school, the child gets more work. The child is expected to be a more independent learner. And sometimes that's very difficult for a child who's used to someone always giving them the information. Right. And then you also have, of course, like 4th, 5th, 6th, where the child is transitioning into junior high. They're now learning that they have to be more independent. Their friends are more independent. They're trying themselves to be, the big boy and not have to go to mom for everything all the time, the big girl and don't have to ask questions all the time because their friends are, more mature. Right. And then you also have that transition between 8th grade and 9th grade, where it's extremely hard because now they're transitioning into high school and they're trying to figure out, okay, I'm not a baby anymore. I have all these expectations. People are expecting all these things from me, and can I handle it? Yeah. So then, of course, you have the transition to high school where they're coming out of high school going into college.
Okay. And in the transitions, there's like a variety of different emotions that come along with it. And, my running joke is that last statement, the way I just handled that last thing, that's like 3 years on the couch for my daughter when she's, in adulthood. Yeah. What advice do you have for parents? Because sometimes it's frustrating. A frustrating moment, you might just like kind of lose it, or maybe you just don't really know what to say, and we kind of sometimes botch it up. So give us some tips that you can recommend on how to handle the children in their emotional growth.
Right.
As parents, because we don't always have that experience.
No, we don't. And to be honest with you, a lot of times as parents, we're going to make mistakes. I mean, that's just real, I have the same running joke with my husband, like, okay, he's going to need about 2 years therapy for that one, right? But at the same time, we also know that when something is happening, we need to address it. Right. We definitely shouldn't let things linger. If you find that your child is withdrawing, if they're not talking as much as they used to, you need to find out exactly why. I've worked with parents who sometimes don't even realize their child is being bullied. Mm-hmm. That's an epidemic that's happening everywhere. Right. So you have a lot of parents that don't even realize that they're raising a bully or have a child who's being bullied. So their child starts withdrawing and they're wondering, why is little Johnny not talking anymore? Because little Johnny feels like he's being, ostracized at school. Right. So parents have to make sure they're paying attention to signs with their kids, and that would help them understand what's going on as well as know when they need to step in. Because as parents, we have to know when we have to step in. Sometimes our kids want space, and sometimes they don't.
Yeah. And I think, personally speaking, I'm sure other people out there are the same way. Like, sometimes we just feel like we should have all access all the time because I'm your mother. What do you mean you don't want to talk to me? What do you mean you don't want to talk about it? We're talking about it right now. Let's stay where bullying, because that's a really big issue now. I can see even now from elementary to kindergarten, they're addressing it in the schools. So what are some signs that either my child is being bullied? I know you said being a little bit withdrawn is one, but is there others? And then how do you know if your child is a bully? Because sometimes parents are like oblivious until they're getting phone calls, from the school.
Sometimes even when they're getting phone calls, are not my child. Yeah. Not my child, not my child, right?
That is true.
So you actually have to pay attention to the signs of your child. First of all, one of the strategies in my book, 10 Parenting Strategies, that you have to know your child's core. Okay. Right? So you have to know what your child is like. What bothers them, what doesn't bother them, what makes them click, what makes them tick, what makes them happy, sad. So if you notice that your child is withdrawn, if they're not talking as much, if they're not as happy as they used to be, you've got to pay attention to those signs. And a lot of times as parents, we can check out. That's just the reality. We're hustling, bustling, going from day to day, trying to work and trying to take care of our families. So we're not always connecting. Right. And because of that, when we notice that our child's withdrawing or not talking as much, or they're coming home angry all the time, they're upset when they come home from school, you have to ask those questions. And it may be, is somebody bothering you? And also having a real good relationship with the teacher.
Right. So give us some questions, because a lot of times it was, how was your day? Fine.
Oh, yeah.
For one, what are some good leading questions to ask to draw that information out of your children?
For one, we shouldn't ask questions that are just going to get a fine, right? Right? We should ask questions like, instead of saying, well, did you take your test? Yes. So, what was on the test? Did you understand all the questions on the test? Do you know what you received on the test? Asking more probing questions to get them to talk more. Because you do have a lot of kids that will automatically say, fine, no, yes, that's it. No, that was no. I'm not doing that either. You have to make sure that you're asking more probing questions and not feel offended because they don't want to talk to you.
Right. So if for someone that doesn't know where to start.
Right.
So is it kind of like, How did you feel at school today? Did you have any uncomfortable situations, like something that detailed or
Right.
a little bit more?
You could ask that. Depending on your child, you'll know if you should ask questions like that, you know? Like, for instance, I was working with a mom who noticed that her daughter had become extremely withdrawn, and she used to be a very happy kid. And after talking to her for like 45 minutes, she finally revealed to me that 2 years ago she was bullied. And she was bullied so much that she didn't want to go to school. So she noticed the signs again, and she thought, you know, well, this is 2 year grades later. You know, I thought she'd be fine. I said, yeah, but bullying doesn't stop.
Yeah.
You know, it might have started in second grade, and now it's still happening in fourth grade.
Yeah.
You know, but so it's just a point of parents recognizing what their kid is about and knowing if their kid has been withdrawn or not talking as much, and then finding out, is that same child around them? You know, talking to the teacher, finding out if the teacher knows what's going on. Do you notice it in school? Because the reality is, if a child is having only the issues at home, okay, what's going on at home? If the child's having the issues only at school, then what's going on at school?
Oh, I think that's
Right.
something that, you know, we really need to hone in on, because sometimes we're so exhausted and drained from our day that
Yes.
that's all we can muster up is like the superficial questions. So I think that's a really good, you know, strategy and point.
And every kid has issues.
Right.
You know, I have a 21-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I can talk to my 6-year-old all day about all the things that, you know, that made him happy today and what made him sad today. You know, and as parents sometimes don't recognize that kids have issues at every stage of life. So in pre-K kindergarten, first grade, like my Ethan at 6 years old, it's nobody wanted to play with me on the playground, right? So when he gets to 9 years old, it may be something different. Nobody sat with me at the lunch table, you know? At 14, it may be something different, you know? I wanted to take somebody out on a date and they didn't want to go with me, you know? So, you know, you have to always make sure that you know where your child is and the maturity level of your child, if your child can handle certain things. And when things happen, make sure you go to them and ask them, how did it make you feel? What's going on with that? You know, I mean, I'm a social worker by profession, so I'm always asking, how did that make you feel? You know, what's going on with that? You know, how did it make you feel when that happened to you? You know, did you talk to that person about it? I mean, my oldest son at one point in time, he's like, okay, Mom, I'm fine. I don't need medication. I'm fine. I'm not depressed. I'm not bipolar, you know, because I'm asking a lot of questions because I know that especially as an adolescent, I work with so many parents who have adolescents that are completely withdrawn, you know, completely in the position where they don't want to talk to their parents about anything at all. So I work a lot with parents to try and like find out why their child isn't talking with them. And when I work with them in my office, I have an office in Clifton, I work with them and find out what's going on, that there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
You know, is it because you're talking too much, you're not listening enough? Is it because the child has some other concerns that they're not telling you about? You know, so we try to have that dialogue.
So good. I'm glad we're right there. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we can dive into some strategies that parents can use
Wonderful.
to, you know,
Thank
once
you so
they
much.
find out this information. We'll be right back with more from Miss Kumari, who will tell us more about some strategies that we can use if you do find yourself in a difficult place with parenting. My name is Ingrid, and we'll be right back.
Television is a powerful and influential medium that allows different groups the opportunity to produce programming that directly affects their own communities. Public, educational, and government access channels ensure that all people, regardless of race, age, gender, disability, religion, or economic status, have access to local government information and the use of a public communication forum. Make sure everyone has a voice. Support your local PEG channels.
Welcome back to Wow Mom. We're here with Miss Kumari Ghafoor-Davis, and we're going to talk about parenting strategies now. So, Kumari, you gave us some great information before the break, just with how to draw out information from our children. And in your wonderful book, you gave us 10 parenting strategies that we can use. So, explain those to us.
Well, when I wrote the book, I made sure that it was a quick read. I know that parents are busy. And I know that you don't have time to sit there and read a long 200, 400-page book.
Nobody has time for that.
Not at all. So the book actually is a very quick read. I wrote it so that parents could read it in about 2 sittings. And, you know, while the baby's sleeping, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to start out with the strategy of building self-esteem because that's one of the biggest things that I talk about very often with most parents. I found that a lot of parents don't recognize that they're the forefront of building their child's self-esteem. most children are not just going to get self-esteem from, out of the air. It's got to be taught.
Yeah.
It's got to be instilled. And a lot of times children don't have good self-esteem and self-concept, which can cause all kinds of other issues when they get older. So I did start out with self-esteem. I started out with building confidence, building character. I talk with parents a lot in the book about all the strategies have to do with building self-esteem, character, has a lot to do with advocating for your child, effective communication, effective listening, effective discipline, making sure that we're there for our children, hearing what they have to say. Also, I talk a lot about teaching children how to make friends and be a friend, because that's one of those things that parents, we don't talk about. No one ever taught me how to be a friend.
Yeah, you just assume.
Again, you just assume, right? Yeah. I mean, I literally had a brother who said to me, I have a brother who said at 11 years old, and I say this in my book, where I came home crying, and he just said, Kumari, not everybody's going to be your friend. By the time you're 25, you may have one or two friends. Yeah. And if you have that, you're lucky, right? And that was kind of like my little all-in on teaching about friends.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we don't learn those things. Yeah. We have to teach our kids how to be a friend, how to choose friends, who is your friend, who's not your friend, why you want a friend, because everybody wants to be liked.
Yeah, and as a parent, that's like always the hard part of parenting. You don't want, no one wants their child to be ostracized, right? And even the base of friendship, I feel like all kind of relates to the self-esteem issue. So let's visit that for just 1 second. What are some tips and strategies to get parents on the road? Because I feel like you're right. The self-esteem issue is the foundation for all the rest of it. Right. So just give us a couple of tips on little things, little tweaks, everyday things that you can do to help.
It should always be letting kids know they're capable, telling them about their beauty, even sometimes even breaking it down. Like sometimes I look at my child and I say, I love your ears, I love your lips, I love your eyes, just letting them know. And unfortunately, when you have kids that do have low self-esteem, I even have like a little pamphlet that I have for girls where, they can look in the mirror and take their whole entire body apart. And kind of write down what they love about it. You're not allowed to say anything negative at all. Those are the kind of strategies that I give to parents when they have a child who has low self-esteem.
A lot of times we don't even know. I know personally, I haven't, my example is, you tell little girls, oh, you're cute, you're pretty, that dress looks so nice on you. And one day I asked my daughter if she thought she was beautiful, like do you think you're beautiful? And she took me to the mirror, she said no, and I'm like, what? Like my heart dropped to my stomach, because I'm like, I tell you, you're cute all the time. What do you mean? And she took me to the mirror and she's like, look, and she's like 6, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking that I'm doing all the right things. I'm saying all the right things as a parent, because I'm telling her how cute her hair looks, or how cute those dress looks, or what. All those things that you think are okay, or that you assume that she knows because she's your child, and that you love her. But just the fact that was her response to the question kind of takes you back.
That happens very often. Don't think you're alone, seriously. Yeah. Honestly, it's more about you asking her what she likes about herself.
Okay.
It's when we tell them, it's kind of like how we're dictating them everything else that we dictate in their life, right? Yeah. But when you ask them and you have them break it down for you, and I'll ask Ethan all the time, what do you like about yourself? And he'll tell me everything. I like to jump. I like to do this. I like to skip. All those different things. But then I say, what do you like? What do you like about your personality? And he'll start talking about how he likes the fact that he's smart. He likes to figure things out. He likes to play with this. So ask her questions like that in terms of what do you like about yourself? That helps them be able to logically think and be able to put it together what they like about themselves, opposed to us telling them what's good about them.
That's a great strategy. Yeah. So. We're there. We got self-confidence down.
Yeah.
What are some of the other strategies that we
Well, even teaching children how to choose friends, just talking with your child about, what do you like in friends? And why do you choose friends that you choose? Right. Because they have to learn that early. They got to learn very early the kind of people that they want to be around. Because when kids are 12, 13, 14, and I'm quite sure I'm not the only one. I'm quite sure a lot of your audience, the same thing. You chose people who were not always good for you, right? Did not serve you well.
No.
So they've got to know very early that, there's going to be some people who are friends and some people who are associates and some people who you just know, right? and they have to know the difference, and you have to talk with them about the difference.
And I feel like that's a really important lesson, even, you know, at any age. And certain ages that they're able to distinguish it a little bit more than others. But I can definitely see where that's a skill that you have to kind of have by the time you get to, you know, middle school and high school.
But you have to teach it.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things that we can't just assume that they know what good people are. You know, you can't just assume, because just because we know what it is doesn't mean that they know what it is. We got to figure out if they know what a good person looks like. You know, so if for instance, my Ethan comes home and he says that somebody was mean to him in the playground, and I say to him, "Are they your friend?" And he's like, "I want them to be my friend." And I said, "But who really is your friend?" And he'll name his friends that he has that don't criticize him, don't make him feel bad about himself. You know, even when he does something silly, they're not mean. You know, those are your friends. The people who really respect who you are your friends.
Yeah. And even when you become an adult, you know, at that point, then that's when you really it really all comes together, all the stuff you didn't know when you were a kid, because we didn't have your book then, right?
Exactly.
So friendship is, you know, and then what are the other ones that we cover in the book?
Well, a lot of times I talk with parents about when you're building even your self-concept, you know, and how children kind of like figure out who they are. Because when kids are teenagers, and I'm quite sure I'm not the only one that struggled as a teen. I mean, you couldn't pay me to be 16 again, right?
I know.
But when you think about the fact of a kid who's going through all those emotions and feelings and trying to figure out who they are, and as a parent, you're like, who are you? Like, I have a friend, she just passed away recently, and she said to me, I'm telling you right now, when Kumar turns 12 or 13, you're not going to know who he is. Wow. And I mean, and I was like almost scared.
Yeah.
So then when he finally turned that age and he just, this transformation, I was like, wow, she wasn't lying, right?
Who are you?
Right. Because they have these different thoughts and these different feelings, and, you know, they're more boisterous and more, you know, their voice is more strong and they feel more confident. So they talk a lot more, you know, some do. And when I talk with parents about who have children who are shy, it's the same thing. You've got to build confidence. A lot of times the shy has a lot to do with confidence.
Yeah. So let's talk about the period of being a teen, since we're talking about teens now. We've transitioned. We've had about 3 transitions now, and now there's like a stranger in your house, as you so well pointed out. How do you pull that information out of the teenagers when it's not so free-flowing as the adolescents?
And what's interesting is that a lot of parents who I work with that have teens, the relationship has been disconnected, and the child is no longer talking to the parent. And, you know, sometimes parents feel like, oh, it's over, you know, I've messed up, you know, that whole thing, and they're going to have a lot of therapy because of me. Yeah. But the reality is, if there was not a strong foundation, it doesn't mean that it's all lost. You just have to build it, you know? But you should be working on the child from when they're younger. That should be the reality of it. You know, working with them when they're really young, talk with them, making sure they can talk to you. And it's all about, again, not always talking when they tell you stuff. You know how when you hear something and they tell you something and you're like, what? You start going crazy and getting all upset. It's kind of like just being calm. Really? Wow. And what happened when that happened? You know, what did you think when that happened? You know, so that you're not showing them that you're judging them, criticizing them, because kids don't want to be criticized. Yeah. A lot of times when I work with parents that have a disconnect with their child as a teenager, it's because they feel judged, they feel criticized, they feel like the parent doesn't listen, the parent doesn't hear what they say, doesn't value them, doesn't value who they are as a person.
And that's so all hard because there's so many things that come into play in teenage years. You know, like some of your first serious relationships come in. You know, there's all these peer pressure, outside influences, drugs, alcohol, when you really need to be talking to your child at that point. Like, it's critical time. Sometimes life and death situations come up in the teen years. So to now feel like you're at a stalemate, you know, with your child, you know, as a parent, and then with your parent as a child, could be really hard. So if I find myself there at the stalemate, you know, and I have to reintroduce myself to the child, and try to come up with these strategies, where do I start?
You start by apologizing. You know, I mean, one of those things that happens in a lot of relationships is that as a parent, we think, well, this is my child, I can do whatever I want. And the reality is, they're still a person. You know, they're still a person, they still want to feel valued. Right. And most of the relationships that I have throughout my career with children that I work with that have terrible relationships with their parents is because they didn't feel valued. Right. They didn't feel heard. Yeah. The parent just, you know, talked at them instead of to them and with them. You know, and unfortunately, kids can feel when the parent's not there. Kids can feel when you come home from work and you're doing everything but listening to them when you're sitting there at the dinner table. They know when they're not heard. They know when you don't have time for them. You know, I mean, there's movies on it, there's shows on it, there's research on it. You know, where the parent is sitting there and the child says, "Yeah, but you were reading the whole time."
Yeah.
You know, you were sitting at the dinner table, but you didn't hear anything I said. I told you the whole story, and all you said was, "Mm-hmm."
Especially in the days where there's so much technology. We're
Yes,
texting,
yes.
we're, you know,
We're Instagramming,
iPad,
yes,
Instagramming,
yes,
tweeting,
yes,
you know. So
yes.
so it's just maybe just
Yes.
having what I started to try to do is schedule time, like, you know, between 5 and 7,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
do nothing.
yeah.
I hone in on homework and
Yeah,
how the day
yeah.
was and all that chatter and try to
Yeah.
condition my mind, and she's kind of going to talk me to death. But
That is great. Actually, that's one of the things that I say in my book, In Effective Communication, that when your kid knows you have time for them, even if you work like 4 jobs, you know, if the kid knows that between 5 and 7 on a Tuesday that they're going to have your undivided attention, they're going to have every paper they wrote, you know, everything that they did that week, everything, all the pictures that they made, they're going to bring them all to you at that time because they know they're going to have your undivided attention.
yeah.
And a kid will respect it.
It really has.
And you have to talk with your kid about the fact that, you know what, I work a lot. I understand I work a lot. Like when my oldest son was younger, I had 3 jobs. I was in school full time, in college, and graduate school. And honestly, that was one of the biggest things was I wanted to make sure that he knew I was there. You know, I was a teenage mom, and my goal was to make sure that I didn't ignore him. So on Sunday afternoons, Sundays were his day. You know, we go to church, then we're off to the movies or get ice cream or whatever, and we spent time together. And and to this day, he still remembers those Sundays.
Aw.
I worked every day except Sunday just so I could spend time with him.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for the tips, Kumari. Please let everyone know, 1, how they can get your book, 2, how they can find you in the social media atmosphere, websites, all those things. Give us your information so that we can continue the conversation with you.
Wonderful. You can get my book on Amazon as well as going on CoachKumari.com/blogspot. And I'm on Twitter at Parenting Expert. And you can find me at CoachKumari@gmail.com.
Great. We will continue the conversation with you. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for joining us today with the Wow Mom Show. We hope that you had some great points here and strategies to help you firm your foundation in your parenting journey. We will see you next time. I'm Ingrid Williams, and I'm a Wow Mom. Thank you.